Aloha mai kako and welcome back to another book review. For anybody who is new, my name is Mama Kitty and today we are going to be reviewing The Wedding Witch by Erin Sterling. This is a romance novel and it's an ARC that I got off via NetGalley. For those unaware of what ARC means, it basically means Advanced Reader Copy. And all that means is that I get a usually unedited free version of the book in exchange for an honest review. Really quick, before we get started, this book is part of Sterling's The X-Hex series. I have not read the first two books. My understanding from the very, very, very minimal research I did is that the other two books are about our male love interests brothers. But so this is the third book in the series. I was able to read it without having to have any of the context from the first two books, but for those of you who like to read things in order, I just wanted to let you know that this is not the first book. The Goodreads synopsis is as follows. The New York Times bestselling author of The X-Hex and The Kiss Curse brightens up the winter solstice with another delightfully spooky novel following Bowen Penhallow and the girl he feels strangely drawn to, especially when she becomes his only hope of salvation after a strong spell sends them to a Yuletide celebration more than 50 years in the past. Bowen Penhallow has always been a loner, studying dark and ancient magic on a mountain in Wales. He prefers it that way, but when his friend, Colin, who happens to be a ghost, asks him to attend a Yuletide wedding at a grand estate deep in the Welsh countryside, Bowen reluctantly agrees. Tamsin Bly is not a witch, but she makes her living off of them. As a procurer and seller of magical items, Tamsin's business has not always been above board, but she's been trying to fix that, mostly. Bowen is an occasional customer, as well as the star of several of Tamsin's dirtiest dreams, but she's been around enough witches to know that, as a human, getting involved with one is not the smartest idea. She's finagled an invite to the witchy wedding of the century, in the hopes of finally making a score big enough to retire. Just one priceless magical artifact from Tywell House would set her up for life. But Tamsin isn't the only one sneaking about in Tywell House, and the mix of a very strong spell combined with a wedding mishap transports Bowen and Tamsin into Tywell's house's past to the Yuletide celebration of 1958. As Bowen and Tamsin work together to get back to the present, they must also face off with the origins of Tyrell House's haunting, the suspicions of their fellow witches, and the fact that somewhere between the mistletoe and the bonfire, they might be falling in love. Doesn't it just sound so much fun? So to start, Tamsin and Bowen, mwah, beautiful characters. Love them to death. Tamsin, so the book switches back and forth between Tamsin and Bowen's point of views, and Tamsin's chapters were a lot of fun. She was just very amusing in how she kind of used the world, and then especially when she started thinking about Bowen and the fantasy she has about him, she was just very amusing. Bowen, on the other hand, was also quite fun to read, but for a completely different reason. He was basically obsessed with this woman, and I was living for it. It's just such a hot character trait to give someone in romance novels, you know what I mean? Granted, you probably wouldn't want that in real life, but it's fiction, it's fine. The pacing of the novel was good. Switching POVs back and forth, right, kind of allowed to make sure that everything that was happening on the page was constantly adding to the flow of the story or progressing the romance. The plot was also really fun. And kind of on that note, I feel like it's important to mention that this is not a smut novel. It is a little spicy. It's like, on a scale of 1 to 5, it's like a 1. As far as, yes, they definitely have sexual relations, but it's not at all graphic, if that makes any sense. So again, on that note, the plot that, substituted for the quote lack of smut, although I didn't go into it thinking it was smut, the plot was fun. I felt like I thought it was interesting that Sterling it's hard because the time travel is, the whole thing of the book. And so I guess I was sort of surprised about the fact that it's stated in the synopsis that they time travel. Again, and this is just kind of a silly critique. It's more just that I had wished that I didn't know that they traveled back in time before I started reading it. I don't really know why. It felt underwhelming because I knew it was going to happen at some point, and I was like, well, yeah, okay. Does that make any sense? But that isn't to say that I didn't like it, because I did. I really enjoyed the whole idea of boy meets girl, boy and girl go someplace where they're not exactly technically quote unquote wanted, and then boy and girl get pooped back 50 years and have to figure out how to get home. Love that. 10 out of 10. And then specifically watching Tamsin and Bowen's separate lives kind of come crashing into each other because of it, and mixing and becoming this new beautiful relationship. It was just a delightful read. One of the other things I appreciated about this was sort of the world building, or kind of more the lack thereof. Again, this was the third book, so I think at a certain point there was probably some world building in maybe the other two, but you would expect a little bit of like world building review, and there was some. But I kind of liked that. And normally, it's kind of like, well, so where are we? What's happening? Who's doing what time frame are we in? Blah 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 blah. Which again, we knew all of that. But one of the things I thought was interesting was magic, right? They're witches, and so magic plays such a huge part, but then they don't really talk about how the magic system works, essentially. They have some conversations regarding the idea that people who aren't born witches, can't become a witch and can't use magic and stuff like that. But she doesn't go into the idea of how to use the magic. There's a little bit of like what it feels like. But I kind of liked that it was sort of up to my imagination of what I believed to be a witch, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And I think part of that too is that it allows for a simplicity in the magic system, whereas like for quote high fantasy novels, you kind of have to really explain the magic so that if there's differences between like one fae faction versus the other and all of that kind of stuff. And because it was so simple, it was more believable that they were just witches hiding in our world, right? That it's not some overpowered, super obvious thing that these witches are running around doing magic. And I don't know if any of that makes any sense, but I really liked how it was so simple. In fact, it was so simple I can kind of give you a rundown. Magic is magic. It can only be wielded by witches. Some of them are powerful, some are not, and bloodlines have a meaning. And then boom, you have a magic system. And that's what she leaned on, and I appreciated it. The romance was also kind of top tier. It's a little bit of a slow burn, and so I definitely had moments where I was kind of internally screaming for them to freaking kiss each other already, because at a certain point that's just how slow burns go, right? You're constantly screaming at these characters to just get together already. There's clearly chemistry, and then they don't until later, and when they finally do, it is a sweet, sweet moment. But having said all that, he does call her a good girl in chapter 2. So if you're a fan of romance, I definitely highly recommend this novel. It was just really sweet and really cute to read, and the characters were interesting, and the chemistry between them was beautiful. And I feel like anybody who likes romance will like this book. I'm going to go ahead and give this book a 4 out of 5 stars, because while it did have me kicking my feet and giggling a little bit, it really just kind of met expectations. The book will be launching on October 14th of 2024, so it's coming up soon, so make sure you guys keep an eye out for it. The next book we will be reviewing is another ARC. It's called The Co-op by Tara DeWitt. The genre tags on Goodreads tags this as a contemporary romance, and I'm very excited to get into it. I found it on NetGalley, and I really just loved the cover, and I loved the description of it, so I'm really looking forward to this one. So yeah, that's it. That's the review. Make sure you guys keep an eye out for it when it publishes, and then I will see you all on the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Mahalo nui loa for listening, and I will see you all next time. Bye.